So I'm in the city of brotherly love on the outskirts of Philadelphia here. Still down here. It's some beautiful spot that I'm at, as you can see. Actually, there were a bunch of deer running in this greenery down here earlier this week. But I just wanted to mention something about I said I was going to come back about Hamburg and what's going on there. It's a very interesting story, Hamburg, because northern Germany or anything far north like that is a slow clay court usually. Because no matter how much they try to compact it, there's different ways to speed up or slow down a clay court. But one way to speed it up is the materials you use in the base underneath. Usually the sub base is like some kind of hard stone or whatever, and gravel kind of thing. Maybe not gravel, but hard stones, and then smaller stones. And then finally there's different materials you can use, like the French Open uses a limestone. There's other things you can use, like a volcanic rock or slag, or with a volcanic rock they call tepetite in Mexico, whatever. But you know, you can also mix some hard materials with crushed brick and then just flatten that. In Germany, they definitely try to make a harder, grittier base because they need it to pass a lot of the water through it. It's not as hot in the northern areas, and so it doesn't dry out as quick. So they need really good drainage. So that's a lot of gritty crushed brick, not the powdery stuff that you have in France. More the gritty stuff and a whole bunch of layer of it and compacted hard, and then maybe a dusting on top. But some of the places in Germany don't even, or in the northern areas, just use a gritty crushed brick powder. It's a little bit of a powder, but it's more like it's a thicker material, so you know, you can hear it when they slide on it. It's very sandy, and again, it's all about drainage and the areas that they're playing up north. In Hamburg, and I think because they have a roof that closes, they can use some of that more powdery crushed brick on the top. It's still a harder base underneath, but they can use the more powdery stuff and have it try to be a more even bounce, you know, because when you have it grittier, you can get more funny bounces. So I think they try to have a nice bounce, plus they can close the roof so they don't get all the rain, because they'll close the roof when it's raining. And so that's a huge difference, that they have a roof there to close. Now, over the years, even with a grittier base and all that, and trying to make it hard and all that, it's still, because of the climate, it's wet, it's cooler, even in the summertime. Though lately, climate change and everything, they've been getting some hot temperatures. They had some really hot temperatures this past week. But basically, it's hard to get that surface to be bouncy and fast. So it tends to be a deader, slower, but a lower bounce. But what they did in the past is they used a head ball. But before 2009 and 08, 07, and I think some years before, they were using the head ATP ball. Now the head ATP ball was ahead of technology back then. The head ATP ball was a harder type of ball, but it was a lot of different things. It had a certain kind of felt. It didn't have a lot of air. It was very balanced. It had a hard rubber, and a little heavier rubber, but with a type of felt that could be used on all the surfaces. They were trying to make an all-court ball that could be used, and it really could be. Penn is the company that makes this ball, and Penn's regular balls really aren't good for clay. They're too heavy. The rubber's too heavy. The felt, the Penn ATP ball, the felt is too strong. But the head ATP ball, a different type of felt, it was a heavy ball too. It's actually possibly a heavier rubber even, but it was a little more air, maybe compressed air in it. Whatever they did, I'm only going into all the details, and I don't know every single detail, obviously, but it was a ball that was more for an all-court game. That's why you can see the head ATP ball was used on clay courts as well as hard courts. Now on a clay court, you're using kind of a hard court style of ball and of manufacturing of a ball. On a clay court, what's going to happen is it's not lighter like a Dunlop, and the type of the Dunlop clay court ball is a little lighter with a felt enough that it will, not a heavy felt though, just, you know, so it will grab and pick up the dirt and the clay, the powder on top, and then bounce a lot. With the head ball, it played more like a hard court, so it would not bounce quite as much, and it would burrow through like the clay a little more because it was a little heavier. But it was pretty slow too, but it would get through. It was great for altitude, where they played clay in altitude, like Gstaad used to use it. Some places in Peru and some other places, when there was some mountains or altitude, this was a great ball, because altitude, the ball can really jump, especially a Dunlop ball. So this ball was great for that. But it was great also the way it played in Hamburg, and you might might wonder, why use a heavier ball in the heavier conditions there? Well, again, the indoor, when they closed the roof, it could get a little bit fast maybe. And so you use this ball, and what ended up happening, this ball stayed pretty low on a dead clay court conditions. And so Hamburg was always known for slow, but a low bounce. And in 2009, they moved the tournament from May into the summertime. And they also switched balls to a Dunlop Fort tournament ball, which is rarely used on tour. Dunlop Fort tournament isn't the clay court ball that they use. And there's a Dunlop Fort clay court they used to use at the French Open, and they still use in a lot of tournaments. And then there's a Dunlop Fort all court. And then you have your Dunlop Fort Championships, which are those the amateur style ones. This is sort of in between the amateur and the pro. It's a Dunlop Fort tournament. It's a little bit of a heavier rubber than the Dunlop clay court, and maybe a slightly more of the felt. So it's a little bit, you would think, slower, but it has more compressed air in it. So it's a faster ball because it has more compressed air. It's going to pop more through the surface. So what happened is they moved to the summer. There was more heat because of that, and because of the climate change on top of it. And when it was raining, they closed the roof, so the surface is still kind of dead, but this ball is kind of skidding through the surface. It wasn't as heavy as the head ball, but it still didn't bounce a lot. And on that kind of surface with the roof closed, they were getting really low bounces. And it was an odd time for the Hamburg tournament. From 2009 to 2011, when that Dunlop Fort tournament ball was used, it was confusing for all us tennis geeks out there. And I was just getting into my surface stuff back then. And I was like, the statistics are coming out quick. And not just that, when you watch the guys play, they're doing serve and volleying. They're playing it like a slow grass court or a slow indoor court, and it was really weird, but it was still pretty slow. But that shows you that a lot of stuff isn't about slow or fast, it's about high and low. The high bounce means more defense, the low bounce is more offense, because when it's slow and it's coming through low, it's hard to get, you can finish points quick that way. You don't have as much time to prepare and make long rallies. So guys that were good with offense and low balls were really doing well at that tournament at that time. And I think Michael Stitch, who was then he's no longer the tournament director. He just he just retired from that, but he was back then. He was just coming on, and I think he liked it a little faster. That was the rumor anyway. He wanted it a little faster, but at the same time, he had some of that. They were adding more of that crushed brick powder on top, which is odd for northern countries to have that powdery substance. That's more for the Mediterranean, France, and Italy down there. So again, that's a little too slow for the northern countries. But again, Hamburg had a roof, and I think Michael Stitch kind of wanted it to have a really good clay court, but he knew it would be slow with that in that climate. But with the roof and with this kind of a Dunlop Fort tournament ball, maybe it'd go a little faster, but I think it was playing too low and too fast. I think in the end of the day, it really wasn't playing like a clay court. It's kind of bizarre. So it was bizarre conditions. So in 2012, they switched to the Tree Torn, and the Tree Torn ball was really developing their own style. They're an old company from Sweden, but they were now developing a style of ball that's all court as well. The same ball could be used for the indoor courts, really even an outdoor court, but mainly indoor courts and clay courts. It could be used all the way around. And it again was more towards the head ball, where it had a harder rubber, but it wasn't quite as heavy as the head ball. Harder rubber, but it could be heavy in cold conditions, but in the summertime, it didn't play heavy. But it was a little heavier than the Dunlop Fort tournament, but not as heavy as the head. So it had a little bit of a bounce, but not too much of a bounce. So now we went from these low bounces to like more of a medium bounce. The head ball was low bounce because it was heavy and it was in the May. Dunlop Fort tournament was just that kind of a ball. And then this ball, the Tree Torn, had a more medium bounce. So now you had like a medium bounce, a little bit more like a clay court. And that went on from 2012 to last year. They had the Tree Torn ball. So you had a pretty medium, slow, the Tree Torn plays a little quicker. So that's that in clay it does anyway. Not all the time in indoor hard courts, but in clay it can. If an indoor hard court is cool conditions, some tournaments will actually lower the temperature, and I know this from tournament directors. They'll like to keep the temperature low to slow it down a bit. The Tree Torn will go pretty slow then. But in the heat, even in Hamburg, and the heat has been, like I said, more lately, that Tree Torn ball played pretty medium bounce, pretty good pace. So that kept the Hamburg tournament not too slow, a pretty decent medium to medium slow, hard court with fat clay court with some defense and offense. This year, we have a new tournament director, I forget his name, but we also have a new ball. The head not a head ATP, a head tour ball. And recently Penn has been developing the new head balls. There was a head ball recently for the women now called Head Pro or something. I can't remember the name, but that was a version of the head ATP. I don't know why they don't say head WTA, but anyway, it's a version of the head ATP, but a little lighter for the women, because the women couldn't use that head ATP. They can't use the Penn ATP. It's too heavy and hard, and for their shoulders and arms. But there's a women's ball now, the head pro ball, I think it's called. And then they also have, and I'm not sure if I'm right on that, but the point is it's one for the women. And then now they have what they call a head tour ball that can be played more all around courts. But if you're going to be on a hard court, you can use the head ATP. This ball looks like it's going to be for clay court. So I don't know if the new tournament director got a good deal. Maybe Head's trying to promote this ball and they gave him a good deal as a sponsor, some money. I have no idea, because there's always money behind all this, obviously. So I don't know what that deal is. But the head tour ball, I was watching a lot of it in the beginning of the week, and I was thinking, wow. Well, from what I was seeing, it definitely has more of a bounce. And from what I know of Head, I didn't talk to anybody directly at this moment, at this time, but from what I know from the past and what my educated guess on all this would be, that this ball is probably going to be a lighter rubber a little bit, which would make sense for clay. I'm kind of getting bit by mosquitoes all of a sudden. It's getting a little bit late. But anyway, so you see me moving around here. But a little lighter rubber than the head ATP, which would put it in the category of like a tree torn. I don't think this ball is that much different than the tree torn ball, but the difference would be, I do think there's more, the type of rubber, remember, there's like 10, a double-digit amount of chemicals going into these rubbers, and they can make little adjustments, all different little adjustments on the rubber. I think the rubber for this head ball, this new head ball, the head tour, would be, well, the head balls in general and Penn as well have a spring to it. Even though it's a hard rubber and a heavier rubber, they can really take off when you smack it. I don't understand exact stuff of that. I'm just saying that's what I know from all the studying and all the interviews and people I talk to. Anyway, so I think this ball is going to have a little more spring to it, even if it's not any, it may be the same weight as a tree torn, but it doesn't mean it won't have a different resilience and a different deformation and spring. And it could be a little more air in it, who knows? And the felt, I'm not sure, but the bottom line of all of that, what I'm trying to say here is this ball, and I said it earlier in the week, is bouncing more than the tree torn. It's getting up, now this court, I mean, they closed the roof, even when they closed the roof, but I don't know that they did that this week, though. I didn't see any tennis with the roof closed. But anyway, it looks like the French Open more. I think they're getting something along the French Open, but, you know, it's weird because the surface is going to be slower than the French Open, but the ball will be a little bit more, now the Babolat's pretty lively too, especially this year. I don't know, but I was seeing high bounces and a little bit of spring and power. But again, remember, these rackets keep improving, the players keep getting more powerful, so that's hard to know where that's all coming from. So anyway, a guy like Dominic Thiem, who likes to wind up and smack the living bejesus out of the ball, would love this ball and this surface and these conditions. And I don't, you know, and early in the week I was watching him and I'm like, whoa, yeah, I mean, the bounce and the smack. So that's kind of a little history of this event. It just shows you, it just gives you a little idea of like how these balls change over times. And you know, and we could talk forever about why they do this and what all goes on and what the truth is, and forget it in the exact specifics and the exact specs. Well, I've never been told ever by a ball company what the exact chemicals were in their rubber. I don't think I ever will be able to be told that, or I don't know how. So you know, you have to do some educated guessing here, but educated guessing with many, many hours of research and also watching is much better than just random opinion. And so that's a heck of a jump. So to know the exact specs, you'd have to work for the company and probably be, you know, not allowed to say, you know. So anyway, that's just a little idea, just to give everybody a little idea of like how this stuff kind of works. And the Hamburg tournament was very interesting. The northern type of clay, the cooler temps, now the hotter because they moved to the summer, the different balls over the time. It's all pretty interesting. I find it anyway.